this year. So there's our youth groups have gotten together before. So we're really trying to build a friendship and a partnership with those guys. There's a lot of values that are similar. I just really want to encourage you to come out. He's an incredible speaker. He's actually getting his PhD in preaching right now. And so it's very intimidating to go preach at his church. I'm like, oh, goodness. But anyways, he's such a relatable guy, so creative and becoming a really good friend as well. And so I just want to encourage you to come out for that. But today, we're going to talk about what it means to listen well. That's tough. It's tough. And to do that, we're going to start in Matthew 25, verse 31 through 40. When the Son of Man comes in his glory, and all the angels with him, then he will sit on his glorious throne. Before him will be gathered all the nations, and he will separate people one from another as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. And he will place the sheep on his right, but the goats on his left. Then the king will say to those on his right, "Come, you who are blessed by my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me drink. I was a stranger, and you welcomed me. I was naked, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you visited me. I was in prison, and you came to me." Then the righteous will answer him, saying, "Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you a drink? And when did we see you a stranger and welcome you, or naked and clothe you? And when did we see you sick or in prison and visit you?" And the king will answer them, "Truly I say to you, as you did it to the least of these my brothers, you did it to me." So I wanted to kick off today's message with perhaps one of the most sobering and challenging passages in the entire Bible. But it illustrates so clearly, I think, the thesis of this entire sermon series that we've been in, Emotionally Healthy Relationships. And it's this very simple statement that's so profound, that love is the measure of our maturity. If you want to understand if I am mature in God, if I am emotionally and spiritually mature, look at how you love. Look at how we love. And this is what Jesus points to. And Mother Teresa, who's one of the most well-known missionaries in human history, and she's known for being the embodiment, right, of God's love to the poor. And she said this about this passage. She said, "It's easy to love people far away. It's not always easy to love those close to us. It's easier to give a cup of rice to relieve hunger than to relieve the loneliness and pain of someone unloved in your own home. The great disease of the West today is not tuberculosis or leprosy. It's being unwanted, unloved, and uncared for. We cure physical diseases with medicine, but the only cure for loneliness, despair, and hopelessness is love. There are many in the world who are dying for a piece of bread, and there are many more dying for a little love. At the end of life, we will not be judged by how many diplomas we have received, how much money we have made, how many great things we have done. We will be judged by, I was hungry, and you gave me to eat. I was naked, and you clothed me. I was homeless, and you took me in." And so, what I want to argue with you today is that it's impossible to love if we don't first stop and notice what's happening around us. If we do not pay attention and listen the way that Jesus listened, we can never love the way Jesus loved. Listening is the doorway to understanding another's most pressing need or desire at any given time. And we had our small groups this past week. We did what we call communion and confession, which is really just dinner and praying for each other. We like to use those big words for whatever reason. And we had dinner at our group, and then we broke up into guys and gals groups and just went around and asked a simple question: how can we be praying for you? And it's interesting, like, how powerful that question is. And when I ask it to people in public, they're caught off guard. But I do this often to, like, a server at a restaurant or something, and just say, "Hey, I just want to know how I can be praying for you." And then I had one, like, return the question back to me, and I was like, so I realized, like, how that question is that's a deep question. But how often do we ask it of other people? And how often is it asked of us? And then people take the time to really listen to what you have to say. I think it can be very profound, and I found it very profound in my small group this past week as I was able to answer, and then the guys that were in my group were able to listen to me, and I felt the power of that, and then even more than that, they prayed for me. We also have what are called Out of the Cave meetings here once a month at the Jubilee Center. They're usually on Sunday meetings, and this is where we support each other through mental and emotional battles that can make us feel alone. And the whole goal of the group is not to fix or to counsel each other, but to provide a safe space where you can feel listened to about your current struggles. And so you share what's going on, what's just going on inside of you emotionally, and maybe the battles that you're facing, and you share very deeply. And the group all around you simply says, thank you for sharing. That's it. And if you've never been in a group like that, you can't imagine the power that has. Just for someone to simply sit there and listen intently to what you're saying, the struggles that you have. And not to do anything further, but then just to say, thank you for sharing that. It's incredibly powerful. And if I just want to encourage you, if you haven't experienced it, to check it out next time we have it. It's going to be on the 17th of next month. But Jesus models this time and time again in his conversations, whether it's Nicodemus in John 3, or the woman at the well in John 4, or Zacchaeus in Luke 19. The Bible says when he saw the rich young ruler in Mark 10, it says this, he looked at him and loved him. Like, I wonder what that, you can sense like the stopping and the noticing, and then the listening as to what's going on. So Jesus listened so well. He demonstrated what it meant to be kind of completely distraction-free. He was, you can imagine, I don't know, imagine having a conversation with him, just being completely locked in, right? And you feeling like, and you know people in your life that make you feel like you're the only person in the world. Like they're so good at just locking in and talking to you one-on-one. I can imagine that's exactly what it was like to talk to Jesus. But David Augsburger said this. He's a theologian, an author, and a former president of pastoral care. He said, listening is so closely linked to loving that the two are almost indistinguishable. The ability to listen well has great power to make someone feel loved, cared for. It gives someone dignity. It can make someone not feel alone. It can bring someone out of darkness. It can even save someone's life. And there's been several campaigns around mental health that have come out, and you've seen different commercials. I'm going to show one that's mainly shown in England, and we'll watch that together, and then we'll talk about it.
Welcome back, everyone. Next to the Chase, it's Sue. Welcome to the show, Sue.
All right.
Hey.
Fancy a cuppa?
Sure.
How was the dreaded school?
It was all right.
There you go. What about that girl, Sophie? You spoken to her yet?
No, but it's whatever.
So it doesn't bother you?
No, not really.
Okay. Look, you know you can talk to me, right? I'm here.
Actually, Dad, it's just that anytime I go over to her, she doesn't talk to me or she walks away, and then I've been messaging her.
So now that I have two daughters, I can't watch anything father-daughter without crying anymore. And one takeaway from this video is that next time I ask Simon out for coffee, I'm going to say, fancy a cuppa? Is that all right, Simon? Simon's from England, in case you didn't know. But this is from the Britain Get Talking campaign put on by ITV, and they highlight actually, specifically in this video, that in the U.S., that Gen Z is 73% more likely to struggle with anxiety than the rest of the generations, which is good to be aware of. But I think this video illustrates the power of listening. And I would say not all conversations or listening opportunities are as crucial as this one, but there is real power, right? And there, you could notice in the video, did you notice when the dad said, "I'm here"? It was translated to, "I love you." Right? So the power of saying, "Hey, I'm here. I have an ear ready to listen to what you're going through," is a translation to say, "I love you." And you can notice like it was the nonverbal cues. And so it's more than just hearing the words, right? You got to listen to the tone. You got to pay attention to the nonverbal cues. It's cueing in with your mind and body and eyes and everything to understand and to listen what's going on with a person. So what I want to highlight today is also the title of this message, and it's coined by Pete Scazzaro, who wrote Emotionally Healthy Church, Emotionally Healthy Relationships, Emotionally Healthy Spirituality. He does the Emotionally Healthy podcast. He did all things emotionally healthy. And so, but he calls this incarnational listening. Incarnational listening. So the incarnation of Jesus is a long word that simply means that God the Son, who's always existed, became Jesus. Like he became God in the flesh. And how I remember this is the word carne, which like I think of the word carnivore, which is like the person who only eats meat, or an animal that only eats meat. And so you think like God, the invisible God, became a man, and so he kind of came in meat form or in flesh form. I don't know if that's helpful or not. But so incarnational, right? So fully present listening. And so when he did this, the Bible says he's fully God and fully man. So Jesus came to be with us. He fully identified with us. Every struggle that we have, every emotion that we feel. But he also never lost his identity. Jesus never came and then was so overcome by the despair of the world that he just kind of lost and forgot who he was. No, he was always fully God, but always fully present with us. And Pete would describe it this way. So number one, Jesus left his world. So when we listen, we leave our own world. Jesus entered our world. So we have now the opportunity to enter another's world through listening. Jesus held on to himself. So when we listen, it doesn't mean we're automatically drawn in to what someone's saying. We're considering it, we're there, but we also have a right, to either agree or disagree. And number four, Jesus hung between the two worlds. So I may not like what I hear, but I can hang between the tension of two different perspectives. And so incarnational listening isn't like completely losing yourself in another person's battles or struggles or whatever it is. We hang on to who we are, but we do enter a place where we're seeking to understand. So in doing this, Jesus was able to fully empathize with mankind in a healthy way. And he continues to do this today, right? God hears us. Jesus listens to us better than anyone else. He knows the struggle of mankind and the darkness of this world far better than anyone else, but yet he does not allow that darkness to overtake him. So as God thinks about all the horrible things that are happening in the world, he's not like brought into a place of despair and just overcome by it. No, he also recognizes all the hope that exists in the world. And he knows his plan to redeem creation one day. And so there's this tension that we can hold. And so sometimes in our attempt to listen and empathize well, we can lose ourselves in someone else's story or struggle. So we find it hard to kind of turn off the emotion we are entering into with someone else, and it can kind of drag us into their world in an unhealthy way. And so I have some diagrams. I got a video and diagrams today. So this is a diagram kind of what I'm talking about. So you have my world, your world, and this sacred space, and then this would be an unhealthy version, the my world, your world, with unhealthy togetherness. There's this kind of overlap that occurs. And so I want to explain what this diagram means. So the sacred space represents two people who are willing to connect across their differences. And this comes through incarnational listening, or listening without losing yourself or allowing a relationship with another person to become a part of your identity, right? And so when our worlds remain separate, my world, your world, and now we have this sacred space, Jesus can be a part of each of these. So Jesus is at the center of my world. Jesus is hopefully at the center of your world. And so when we enter into relationship, into this sacred space, Jesus can now inhabit the sacred space. And there can be a sense of health as we interact and listen to one another. But we're not overcome by each other's struggles. You get what I'm saying here? So Pete puts it this way. He says, this helps explain why it is a powerful relationship when we listen deeply to someone. When genuine love is found in the relationship, God's presence is manifest. So God meets us in the sacred space, but then we go back. So can we go back to the diagram? I know I have the next quote up. We can just leave the diagram up. In the unhealthy togetherness, we want or expect another person to think or feel the way that we do. And so we come into a conversation with expectation to draw the other person into our own perspective. Or you come into the situation being drawn into the speaker's perspective if you're the listener. And it puts you in this place of unhealthy togetherness. You kind of lose objectivity as the speaker and the listener. And so this occurs when we don't actually want Jesus-centered care or Jesus-centered listening to whatever we're going through. We just want to get our point across. Or we want to gossip. Or we want to boast. Or many other forms of unhealthy relationship and communication. And when this happens, sometimes if a relationship becomes my world, your world overlapping into unhealthy togetherness, sometimes those worlds need to be drawn back apart. And then you need to reestablish that sacred space that you can enter into, choose to enter into, and then leave again. And this is kind of getting deep into kind of like, I don't know, psychological stuff. And I don't even know if I'm the best guy to talk about this. But it does talk, it is important to note that when we try to listen incarnationally, we're not called to just lose who we are into another person. And that's not what Jesus did either. We do want to focus and listen and respond, but we also want to remain who we are and keep our identity found in Jesus and not lose it in someone else. And so a big way we can become relationally, emotionally, and spiritually mature is to listen the way that Jesus listened. Is to enter into this sacred space with one another, build relationships, and be able to listen. But how do we do that? How do we know we're doing it well? Well, I happen to have a 10-question test to know how you're doing in this area, and we're all going to take it together right now. Should be fun. So as I'm going through these, you can count the number of questions that you can honestly say yes to. There's a number of ways you can do it. You can do it in your head. You can count with your fingers. But just know the person next to you is going to know what the answer is. You can write it down, whatever you want to do. But I'm going to go through 10, okay? And we can go through these together and just count the number that you say yes to. Number 1, my close friends would describe me as a responsive listener. Okay, that's good. Number 2, when people are upset with me, I'm able to listen to them without being defensive. Think about this in relation to the person you are closest to in the world. So if you're married, it's your spouse. How do you do with number 2? Moving on to number 3. I listen not only to the words people say, but also to the feelings behind their words and their body language. So how good are we at? Those nonverbal cues like in the video. Number 4, I have little interest in judging other people or quickly giving my opinion to them. It's tough. Number 5, I am able to validate another person's feelings with empathy. Number 6, I am aware of my defense mechanisms in stressful conversations. Appeasing, ignoring, blaming, distracting. Silent treatment, anybody? Anybody do that one? Number 7, I am profoundly aware of how the family I was raised in has shaped my present listening style. And this goes back to what Simon talked about last week, about how his family upbringing affected some of the things that he struggled with, specifically related to rejection, but then how you can take steps to overcome that. Are you aware of how the family you brought up in communicated and listened to one another and how that affects you today? Number 8, I ask for clarification when listening rather than fill in the blanks or make assumptions. Whew. Does anybody else, finish people's sentences before they're done? I'm raising my hand because I do that, and that's not a good way to listen. So I'm a no for number 8. Number 9, I don't interrupt to get my point across when another is speaking. And number 10, I give people my undivided attention when they are talking to me. I'm pretty sure Jesus is the only one who did number 10. Like maybe there's a few other people. I mentioned Mr. Rogers a couple of weeks ago. I think he did that too. But yeah, here you go. So here's your score. 8 to 10, outstanding. 6 to 7, very good. 4 to 5, good. 3 or less, there's a great opportunity for growth today. So to put it as nicely as I possibly can. So for those of you who got a 10, you can go home at this point. I can't do anything to help you. We'll see you next week. But for the rest of us, I've got some helpful tips that can help us maybe go from a 4 to a 5 or a 5 to a 6 or a 6 to a 7. And so here we go. We got some helpful tips here. Number 1, give the speaker your full attention. This is super straightforward. So you cannot multitask and listen well. You can't. Turn off the TV, close the laptop, put down the phone, right? Turn your body and your head in the direction of the person speaking and position yourself to listen. Give them your full attention. Be present in the moment with the speaker. Jesus was so good at this, and we watch him time and time again when he's interacting with these folks, how he does that so well. Number 2, step into the speaker's shoes and feel what they are feeling. This is called empathy. Okay, and Romans 12:15 talks about it. It says, rejoice with those who rejoice and weep with those who weep. And to some, this comes natural, and to some, this takes real intentionality and practice. We want to immediately jump in and fix before we feel, but slow down. Love people the way that Jesus does. You have to enter into the pain before you can help pull somebody out. You see what I mean? Number 3, avoid judging or interrupting. Here we go. Peter always gives us a great example of what not to do. So we're going to go to Peter. In Matthew chapter 16, it says, from that time, Jesus began to show his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem, suffer many things from the elders and the chief priests and scribes, and be killed, and on the 3rd day be raised. He's explaining to them the most important thing about his ministry. There's probably not a more important time to listen, especially to Jesus. But Peter creates his own narrative. He tells Jesus what's supposed to happen. It says, and Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him, saying, far be it from you, Lord, this shall never happen to you. But Jesus turned and said to Peter, get behind me, Satan. You are a hindrance to me, for you are not setting your mind on the things of God, but on the things of man. So if you're not aware, that was not a compliment from Jesus. I also think this is not like an example that Jesus wants us to follow. So if someone's not listening well, don't say, get behind me, Satan, okay? Don't do that. That's not a good thing. But Jesus is Jesus, so he can do that here, and he does. And we see Peter just like saying, he's creating his own narrative as to what's supposed to happen. He's interrupting Jesus' story about what Jesus' plan is for the earth. And so don't jump to conclusions before you take time to understand. That's judging. So, once again, anyone else here guilty of finishing other people's sentences before they're done? Yep, me too. So, interrupting a story, how about this one? Interrupting a story with your own story that is so much better. And I think so many people feel like that you're a really good conversationalist if all you do is you hear someone else's story, but then you tell your own story that relates to that story. Listen to my story. You know what I mean? I got you something. And I feel like so many people are so confident in their ability to have a good conversation when really that's all they do. And really it's just an effort for them to be able to talk about themselves rather than again, the theme of today, listening, and then asking further questions to draw that out. I got a couple of fun quotes here. Albert Einstein, pretty smart dude. Same birthday as him, by the way. I don't think that means anything. I'm not saying that, yeah, I'm not implying anything there by any stretch. But he says this: if A is success in life, then A equals X plus Y plus Z. Work is X, Y is play, and Z is keeping your mouth shut. Mark Twain, it's better to keep your mouth closed and let people think you are a fool than to open it and remove all doubt. There you go. So I need to listen and receive those at time. Number 4, reflect back on what you heard them say. So once the person is finished speaking, you've given them their attention and you're hearing them say, it can actually be helpful for you to say, am I hearing you say, and then fill in the blank. Almost repeat back to them what you heard them say, and then ask them, hey, am I correct? And kind of summarizing what you've just said to me. And so Simon is actually a master at this, right? And I'm not sure if your wife Allie agrees, but in team meetings, you're really good at this. So what I'm hearing is, see, I'm terrible at this. Terrible. I prefer conversations to happen quickly. Come on, guys, let's move on. Didn't everybody get it? Let's move on to the next thing, right? So anyways, Simon, thank you for how you add that to our team. It is great. And in the end, actually, it saves time because you get clarity on what someone's saying rather than assuming you know what they're saying and then moving on too quickly based on inaccurate interpretation of the information, right? So we need to reflect back what we're hearing people say. Number 5, when the speaker stops talking, ask, is there anything else? Draw them out. Is there anything else that you want to say? Great customer service representatives do this, right? Is there anything else, Mr. Fogel, that I could help you with today? And once again, I get annoyed. I'm like, no, you idiot. If there was something else, I would have told you, right? For some reason, I just completely lose the fact that I'm a Christian and that Jesus has transformed me when I'm on the phone with customer service representatives. I don't know why. I don't know what it is. Maybe I need to repent, obviously. But it is a good question. It is good customer service to ask that, and I don't know why I get so annoyed. But anyways, John Mark Comer, who's much closer to Jesus than me, he says this. He says, when we listen and we ask questions and we make peace with the lull in the conversation or silence, we often draw people out of their shell and discover the beauty of another soul. It's pretty good. I don't think the customer service representative is trying to discover the beauty of my soul, but it is good in general practice as we talk to people. You don't always have to fill in the silence with your own voice, right? Wait for people to finish. I'm so bad at this. I'm preaching to myself today. Number 6, ask questions that deepen or clarify your understanding. Again, Jesus was so good at this. Matthew 20, and as they went out of Jericho, a great crowd followed them, and behold, there were 2 blind men sitting by the roadside. And when they heard that Jesus was passing by, they cried out, "Lord, have mercy on us, Son of David." The crowd rebuked them, telling them to be silent, but they cried out all the more, "Lord, have mercy on us, Son of David." And stopping, again, watch Jesus what he does, and stopping, called to them and said, "What do you want me to do for you?" And they said to him, "Lord, let our eyes be open." And Jesus in pity touched their eyes, and immediately they recovered their sight and followed him. And so in this situation, even though it seemed obvious, these men were blind, Jesus still asked the question, what do you want from me? What do you want me to do for you? He did not assume. He took time to ask the question. And often I would say a good question to ask someone who's coming to you for advice, or maybe they've just finished sharing something for a long time, and then you're thinking about responding. A good question to ask somebody is, do you have a specific question for me in this? Right? It's a great way to do it. So Gary, who's one of the members here, he did that to me this week. I called Gary and I just talked for a really long time, and then Gary's like, so what's your question? And I'm like, thank you, Gary. I need to ask you a question. That's why I called. But But yeah, so asking that question is super helpful. Asking questions to get clarity in what was just said, or additional questions, right, that take you deeper into understanding who a person is. Ben McCutcheon, where are you at? Yep. He's best in the world at this. So Ben's the manager of Revive in Smyrna, and I worked with Ben for a number of years at Revive, and he would ask people the most invasive questions, one after another, and they just answer him. Like but the thing is, Ben, that I love about you is that you're asking them genuinely caring. And you're like, I want to know more about you. I don't want to just share my story that relates to your story. I want to draw you out. I want to listen to what your life is about. And because of that, there's so many people that come in that store that are drawn to you relationally because you listen well. And I think I just want to grow in that, and I feel challenged every time around you. But asking questions, guys, that draw the person out. And then number 7, clarify the takeaways from the conversation. So depending on the nature of the conversation, you might want to ask this question, like, of everything that you've shared, what's the most important thing that you want me to take away from this conversation? That can be helpful. Sometimes that might be an awkward question, but sometimes it can be helpful. And if there's like tasks or to-dos on the back end, like clarify those at the end of the conversation. So what I'm hearing is that I'm going to do these things and you're going to do these things, and then we'll come back together at this time. Or whatever it is, clarify what the takeaways from the conversation are. So, again, these are super practical, but they're just 7 tips, I think, that are biblical ways that we can listen better, listen more like Jesus listened. Henry Nouwen summarizes it this way. He says, from experience, you know that those who care for you become present with you. When they listen to you. When they speak, you know they speak to you. And when they ask questions, you know it's for your sake and not their own. Their presence is a healing presence because they accept you on your terms and encourage you to take your life seriously. I like that last part. When someone listens well, they're encouraging you to take your own life seriously. And they ask further questions to draw it out. Actually, I'll call someone else. Matt Decker's really good at this. So good. Like earlier this month, I was sharing with Matt about how one of my messages probably should have been 2 messages, but I kind of condensed it down into one. And so he was like, so why didn't you just make it 2? It sounds like it should have been 2, but like you just decided to make it 1. And it's like, what you were doing to me in that moment is like, you were like, why aren't you taking yourself seriously? Like, if you think this way, like, follow your gut, right? And so, but I just think it's so helpful, and there's many different ways that we can love each other. And when we choose to listen well, it shows value to a person and how they're thinking and how they're processing something. And so, I've got some homework for you, so you can put this into practice immediately. A question you can do to practice incarnational listening. If you come to small group this week, we're going to do this. We're going to break up into groups of 2 or 3 and do this. So this is a question. What's the biggest thing impacting you right now, and how are you feeling about it? I promise you there's people in this room right here and now that wish somebody would ask them that question and take time to listen to them. And if you're in a place where you have healthy friends and healthy relationships, you may not be aware how powerful a question like that could be. And so I just want to encourage you, like, practice this. Practice being present in the moment with people. Let's go and have the band come up. With all that being said, there is something that presupposes all of this advice. And these are helpful tips, and we do want to follow Jesus' example, and that's super important. But this is absolutely essential to your emotional, your relational, and your spiritual health. It's listening to God through His Holy Spirit. And by the way, realizing that God, the God who created everything that we see and know, the entire universe, listens to you when you speak to Him. Now, we can know that like intellectually, but to know that deeply and experientially, this relationship that's offered by God to us, where he speaks to us and we get to walk with him and listen to him, and then we can speak to him and he listens to us, has so much power. He walks with us in every aspect of what we do. And one of the things that I do, I try to start my day when I pray for all of the meetings that I'm going to have and all the situations I'm going to be in, every person that I'm going to encounter. And I ask for God to go ahead of me and to help me in those conversations. Help me be present in the moment with these people. And to speak your words of life that I know he can speak through each one of us if we choose to listen to him. There's a sense where in listening to other people while in relationship with God, you're kind of listening with God. God gives you his ears and gives you his heart and gives you his words to speak to another. There's power, guys. And that's why our vision statement is that we want you to know God, right? A relationship with God has to start there. When we understand that we are listened to and that we can listen to God in every aspect of our life. And that leads to us finding freedom, discovering our purpose so that we can make a difference, right? And so this freedom that we want to find is first found in knowing God and walking with God in every aspect of your life. And that's what we need more than anything. And that's where this practice is more important than anywhere, is understanding how we can listen to God and understanding what his voice sounds like and knowing that we can speak to God and speak to him our deepest pains and knowing that he can heal us in that time. And so I just want us, when we think about listening, to think about it in that way, knowing that it's a really hard thing to do and we need God's help to do it, but also knowing that we can practice with God himself. So that when we interact with other people, we can have his power and his relationship and his strength with us. Let's go ahead and stand. And if you're here this morning and you've never experienced this relationship that I'm talking about, where you hear from God, God speaks to you, you listen to him, and knowing that he listens to you, that relationship is available today through what Jesus has done for us. He died in our place for our sins. He paid for all of our mistakes. The Bible says if we believe in our hearts that God raised Jesus from the dead, then we will be saved. We will enter into this relationship with God. And he will walk with us in this life, and we will get to spend forever in eternity with him when we die. And this relationship is offered here and now. And I just want to encourage you, if you've never taken that step to commit your life to Jesus, or maybe you've been a little bit estranged from what you know is true, and you want to recommit your life to Jesus today, I just want to give you that opportunity to say yes. Over this next song, just say, God, I want to follow you. Jesus, I want to follow you. I want to live my life for you. I want to know what it's like to listen to you. I want to know what it's like to walk with you in everything that I'm doing. And if you make that decision, we want to know about it. So we'd love for you to mark that on your communication card, to commit your life to Jesus, to recommit your life to Jesus. But I want to encourage you, we have a prayer team. If our prayer folks can come up to my right over here. These folks are going to be ready. They're going to be up front over here. If you want prayer for anything at all related to today's message, if you want help in taking your first step to follow Jesus, they'll be available with you. And but we're going to sing a song of praise and just respond to God in our hearts in the way that we know the Spirit's leading to us. So let's sing a song together.